Hey guys, I was alerted by the main suspected that a new update had been released today, patch 0.9.1, with what looks like a bunch of changes based off the feedback from the players on the Discord. It only feels like yesterday I was analyzing patch 0.9, but with the quick responses from the developers like this, I'm already making a new one. Overall, I'm pretty happy with this update, with some changes more than others. I'll run through what the major changes are in this update, what I expect it'll change in Dreadhunger, and any extra thoughts I might have on the change and its surrounding topic. Number 1. Bones are back on the menu because you can use them in stew again. However, they do make the stew human and they can be poisoned. I expect we'll see more stews with this update, which is great, as in the current state or the previous state of 0.9, there was, simply put, less food on the map, less ways to make stew. I was finding myself hungry more often if I wasn't making the effort to go out and make or take out a wolf out and carve it up and eat the food myself. But will this be a reason for crewmates to pick up bones? Hopefully. I'd love for there to be more argument, more reason for players to be picking up more than just 2 bones for a bow, as it was currently in this patch, or at least the patch 0.9, that if you ever picked up more than 2 bones and you got caught running ahead, checking all the bodies, taking all the bones, that you'll probably a thrall running off to make totems. And generally speaking, you're most likely doing that. At least with players running ahead, grabbing bones, there's counter argument for it. You're not just a guaranteed thrall because you took all the bones. Maybe you took them, stashed them away, and make stews later in the game very easily for your crew, despite cannibalizing them. It won't be a big issue as there isn't much time left in the game anyway, and there is now stew and everyone's well fed to go up to Nitro. There's an argument for that already. I'm loving that change and that makes me happy. But, of course, it comes at the trade-off that bones cannot be left in the stove while cooking a stew and be guaranteed not to come out with 8 poison stews, because you can now poison bones despite in previous patches not being able to. As the cook, it was very strong to bring back 10 bones, chuck them on the stove, and create a stew and then fuck off to the other side of the map, grab coal again while it's cooking. When you get back, there may be 1 or 2 stews that have been poisoned, but someone would have to have 8 individual poisons to poison every single one of your stews. And that is a risk I'd generally be willing to make for the sake of saving time, so I don't just have to look at a stew being cooked for 2 minutes. However, with the bones being able to be poisoned, that counters that play. The cook needs to commit time or risk their stew being poisoned, just like any other meat, as well as creating a human stew. So it's a double whammy. You've not only made a human stew for the crew, but everyone's cannibalized and poisoned because you didn't realize the bones could be poisoned again. A good change in all. On the topic of the stove, the next change is about the sounds that are heard when liquid-based foods and drinks are crafted on the stove or created using the stove. Basically, all other players that aren't you or the person creating the antidote, poison, or tea will hear the same sound effect. Which is fantastic. That also applies for stew, by the way. So if you see someone cooking on the stove, you're not sure what they're making based on the sound effect alone. You'll need to ask for proof if you want to investigate, or you'll just have to take their word on what they're making. However, you can still hear the original sound, so you can still hear the kettle boiling as the player making the tea, which is nice. I like hearing a good kettle boil. Uh, makes me happy. I do love a good cup of tea. Now, the next major change is to do with powder kegs, and thank goodness for that. Powder kegs now do much less damage from the outside of the ship or from the deck of the ship. Basically, if they aren't on the lower deck where the leaks are found, they aren't going to be nearly as deadly. This lowers the power of placing powder kegs on the ice around the ship or throwing them onto the ship from the ice. and being rewarded with significant damage to the crew. As a thrall, you want to save time while doing as much damage as you can, and previously you could put a keg on the outside of the ice, no one will hear it, it'll blow up and do, I believe it was 5 damage, which is still a significant amount of damage. Much less damage I expect will be significantly less holes. I'm testing that out on the screen right now, so you'll be able to see how many there are on screen. I'm going to be recording that after this, so I'm not able to tell you by voice right now. It's also a buff to Deception Thrall, as it's now another incentive and strength for thralls to keep their cover to ensure their bombs are doing maximum damage by being allowed amongst the crew to be able to plant bombs without being caught and without running onto the ship and everyone alerting you or alerting each other that the engineer just came onto the ship, they're going to plant a bomb, and it all being over Red Rover. Adding to this, barrels no longer float, which means a few things. Throwing barrels into the water ignited to do damage to the ship just to slow the progress of the ship isn't going to be an option. On the flip side, barrels can be destroyed by throwing them into the water, so crew can dispose of powder kegs easily without having to set them off. But thralls can also destroy barrels of coal that are lying around the ship, which people often do to store coal for the later part of the game once Nitro has exploded the iceberg so they can get out. Extra risk with leaving it on the ship hiding about in barrels is 3 coal at a time can be tossed off into the water and destroyed. But it's also a problem carrying coal up to Nitro and back in case you're killed and you lose that coal and it's out somewhere in the Arctic, not on the ship where it can be used. So the trade-offs and risks are high, and thralls will be able to capitalize on whatever the crew choose to do. And crew will have to get creative when storing coal on the ship. So they can't just put 3 coal in a barrel and take a lot of the time from the thrall having to drop 3 items, pick up the barrel, store the coal in their inventory, drop the barrel again, and then throw the coal off the ship and pick their items again. It's now pick up barrel, throw into the water, done. That's it. A great change in my opinion. Finally, for when you do locate a powder keg as crew, the time to disarm has been lowered. Let's test the time. I'm still not a fan of the blow out fuse disarm method. As an Australian, my ping is already high. I'm lagging a second or 2 behind the US, and it can be difficult to disarm a powder keg being 2 seconds behind the keg when I finally do find it. The next change is small, but a blessing. The cooldown for cannibals has been increased. Woohoo! No one has ever played Dreadhunger, had Cannibal Wave after Cannibal Wave called on them or even their group, died and gone, yeah, I'm glad that that's how the thralls killed me. What a fun and exciting game mechanic. There is a little bit of salt in that. It's happened to me more than enough times, but you do improve and it doesn't happen as often with more experience. It doesn't mean it doesn't feel shit when it does happen. The new cooldown will at least decrease the amount of cannibals in a game, and hopefully encourage players to get creative with their thrall matches and do things that aren't just summon cannibals, build totems, summon cannibals, build totems, summon more cannibals. Keep an eye out on this YouTube channel for an in-depth analysis on cannibals, as well as a surviving cannibals guide coming out next week. The last change in this patch I think that's worth mentioning has to do with the movement of the ship, which since update 4 or version 0.9 has been much slower than it has been in previous patches. Fuel now burns for longer in the boiler when the ship is moving slower. How much by is unclear. I'll be playing a bunch of games on my Twitch stream, so we'll see if it's noticeable over there. The ship should get further with less coal, but the ship will still be moving at the same slow to medium pace during the first few days. Honestly, I'd be happy if they sped up the ship, added more icebergs, but kept the hull leaks as a way to significantly slow the ship down. High risk, high reward. Slowing down the ship in ice just slows the game pace down and might deter people from playing games, given they're currently taking between 25 and 40 minutes to complete a single game of Dreadhunger. Every other change seems minor and not worth analysing. There's more language translations available, which doesn't affect me, but will help grow the game through language barriers. I'd expect to see more language servers popping up too eventually. There are also some tweaks to the point gaining system within the game, including one that seems to give points for being embedded as Thrall. I'm guessing that means that when you're on ship around crew and surviving, you gain points. I'm not really sure, we'll have to test that. There are some fixes, none of which I've noticed previously as issues, but I'm glad they're fixed if they were causing players problems. And finally, some lighting changes on both maps and a few new icons. That just about wraps up this patch analysis. Thanks for watching, and make sure you subscribe for more Dread Hunger and Dead by Daylight videos. Well guys, I hope you enjoyed or at least learned something from watching. If you did, you can click over here for more Dread Hunger related videos, including some of my best and worst moments in this brilliant game. I stream this game a lot, so you're welcome to come by the stream anytime. Link is in the description below. Finally, I do constantly push myself to come up with new and exciting strategies for both Thrall and crewmate. So if you're interested in keeping up to date with what I am doing, you can subscribe or click that little bell. But please don't hit the bell on the ship. Over and over and over and over and over again. Please. Please.